Hello. Oh, awesome. It was working. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you here today. My name is Anna. I use she, her pronouns, and I am here with Encircle. I want to take a moment to introduce our presenter today. So, Cameron's love for people translated into studying film and media arts. Being raised in a home of arts and social work, Cameron loves the transformation that happens through relationships, art, and learning. For 3 years, Cameron has taught film, race and culture, and other electives at Walden School of Liberal Arts. She simultaneously works at Encircle Provo as Community Outreach Coordinator, where she continues to educate and strengthen relationships that help LGBTQ plus individuals and their families to thrive. Cameron currently lives in Provo, though she has roots from a number of places. I, as a home director at Encircle, have worked with Cameron. Besides being an amazing human being, she does an excellent job at building relationships for our communities where we can continue to build safe places for the LGBTQ community. So let me transfer the time to her. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Anna. It has been a joy to work with Anna at the Provo home. Either Anna or I will be there most of the time if you stop by for a tour, so come say hi to us. So thank you for being here. I'd love to see a little bit who's in the room. Do we have some educators here? Any educators? Yes. Some healthcare workers? Maybe parents? Okay, awesome. All of you, I love this group of mixed backgrounds and industries, but all here because hopefully you care about some similar things, and I love that. So thank you for using your time for this today. So as you know, our title today is The Role of Diversity and Inclusion in Mental Health and What the LGBTQ Community Can Teach Us. So the LGBTQ community is going to be our lens looking at this, but please, as I talk about this community, you can apply these stories, you can apply these principles to any of the diverse populations that you serve. So please keep that in mind. So I'll share that Encircle's mission statement is to bring the family and the community together to enable LGBTQ plus youth to thrive. And our slogan that you'll see on a lot of our t-shirts is no sides, only love. And I really want to emphasize the word thrive here. We didn't say like survive, we didn't say get by, it's not just breathe. We really want to guide youth to a life that is thriving and full of wellness, embodied wellness. And throughout my presentation today, I'm a person that likes conversation, so if you have questions, I want to invite those as I present. I'm not going to wait till the very end because I don't even want us to run out of time. Feel free to tap in and respond. So I'll come back to my journey in a second. I want to share how Encircle came to be. So John Williams is an example of someone, oh my goodness, sorry you can't, I hope our online friends can see this better than our in-person friends. It's kind of dark. But this is a picture of John Williams. John Williams came out as gay to his family over 50 years ago. So this is when the landscape culturally was even more tense than it can be right now. And so he came out to his family, and they were religious, and they had grown up with their own ideas about the LGBTQ community. However, thankfully, they responded with love, and they responded with, okay, like, we love you, John. Be who you want to be. So thankfully, John was accepted by his family, including his LGBTQ identity. And because of that, John was able to focus on being John rather than focusing on shame that some of our LGBTQ peers get caught up in because of reactions to them. So, because of that, John was able to thrive, and John became a businessman known in Salt Lake City. He started Gastronomy Inc., and so between the years of 1980s, 1990s, he opened up 10 restaurants in Salt Lake City. If you know The New Yorker, if you know Market Street Grill, if you know Oyster Bar, he founded those buildings. And he loved taking old buildings and giving them new life and making them spaces of connection. And not only did he do that in his business life, his private home was a refuge for many of his family and many of his friends. And Stephanie Larson, the CEO of Encircle, she will tell you herself that she had studied the traditional family and was defending the traditional family in Washington, D.C., and she marries into this family. John Williams is her husband's uncle, and Stephanie had her own ideas about the LGBTQ community, but as she got to know John, those ideas expanded because she saw that this individual was loving in a way that incorporated all of her beliefs about love and care. And so together, both she and John became increasingly concerned about the number of LGBTQ individuals that we are losing to either suicide or mental illness, and they decided to create a refuge and a safe space for this community together. And so we have Encircle. This is the first and original Encircle Provo, and then we opened up Encircle Salt Lake City by Trolley Square, and then we opened up Encircle St. George, and we are next expanding to make an Encircle Heber and Encircle Ogden, and we're going to expand into Idaho and Las Vegas and Arizona in the coming years, and we're so excited. And I want to say that everywhere that an Encircle home pops up, we're there because the community invited us there and supported us in building it and volunteer time and money and volunteer time. And that means a lot to me because I've been born in this community, and I might have my own biases or beliefs and assumptions about this community and how they might respond to their LGBTQ peers. But thankfully, the existence of Encircle has changed my views of the communities around us. And I have so much more hope and gratitude because they're here and they're supported. So I'll share a little bit more about my journey into Encircle really quickly, just so you see how personal and close to home all of this is. I cannot speak to the experiences that some have of having a chronic mental illness or something that really affects you day to day. I've experienced situational anxiety, and when I was in my senior year in college, I had an intense high episode of my anxiety, and I couldn't figure out why, and it lasted for months and months and months, and it reached the point where I teetered on dropping out of college because I didn't think I could make it there. And I was seeing a therapist, which helped in the moment, but it didn't do enough to release the weight when I would leave that office. And this was really hard for my parents to watch, and it was not something that could easily be fixed. And there was this one day where my dad checked in with me again, and he asked how I was doing, and I shared nothing had changed. And he looked at me and he said, "Camlyn, I don't care if you graduate. That's not what's important. I just don't want you to fall apart and lose your beautiful mind." And those just happened to be the magic words to shift. Because what we didn't know was that I didn't know that my parents were afraid of the same thing I was afraid of, which was losing myself. I didn't know that the priority could be my mental health just for the sake of my mental health, not so that I could graduate and complete X and Y, or so that I could make the family proud, or all of these things. I guess on some inner child level, I was trying to please my parents with this falsely prioritized expectation. And thankfully, my dad was able to say those words and mean it. And I could tell that he meant it. And their actions of both my parents and family supported that. And so thankfully, I was able to release myself from the pressure that I was creating about my own expectations for myself. And I graduated. And at the same time, that was, I would say, I guess, the internal journey that connects me to a community that might experience anxiety because of expectations or experience anxiety because of these things. And then externally, I started connecting with the LGBTQ community because there was a day where I was sitting in my congregation one Sunday and I looked around and I had this personal self-recognition for a minute. I checked in and I'm like, whoa, Camlin, like all of the people that you are spending your intimate time with, all of the people that are in your social circles come from the same demographics. They're the same faith, they're the same race, they're the same sexuality and orientation. And that's beautiful, and they're beautiful people, and I have great relationships with them, but that's actually not what I value. That's against my own personal principles. That's not authentic for me, because I do value diversity. However, just because of the comings and goings of the day, I was living a segregated lifestyle and only putting myself around people who were similar. And so I kind of resolved to start making friends and relationships with people who were different from me. And I made that resolve, and thankfully the universe responded. And I met someone who was gay and out in the community, and we both shared a love for storytelling together. And so we started holding these storytelling nights, and he would invite his gay friends, and I would invite my straight friends. And we had this cute little integrated circle of people sharing parts of themselves about their journey, or things they've learned about love, or things they've learned about their identity, or just sharing an art piece. And in those circles, in those stories, I started hearing from his queer community different vocabulary words I'd never heard before, or hearing things that they'd learned about their identities that actually resonated with me. And I came to learn that difference is normal, actually. That is what's normal, is difference, variety, diversity. That is the norm to expect and celebrate. And knowing that, so learning these kind of two lessons, when eventually I came out to myself as being part of the LGBTQ community, I was much later than many people in this community. I was 25. But I guess thankfully, because of all that I had learned up to that point, I didn't experience some of the shame or some of the fear that others in this community experience. And I'm fortunate that I've learned some of these lessons prior to that point and was able to have a safe kind of coming out experience that not everyone gets. So that's a personal kind of example of how these things can play out in mental health and wellness. And so I'll come back to Encircle and what makes us different and unique. We utilize a neutral approach. We're not affiliated with any political party. We're not affiliated with any religion. Our slogan, again, is no sides, only love. That's our focus. And we focus on the family, and we build physical homes and spaces for people to come to and gather in. And we embrace community conversations. So I emphasize that because we've seen such a diverse group of people come through. We've seen parents, we've seen religious leaders come through, we've seen people who are still in the closet, people who are out, people who just have questions. It's a welcoming space no matter where you're on in that journey. So how does Encircle go about its mission? We focus on 4 outcomes. We focus on positive and emotional experiences for our guests. So this is having a happy, constructive, and joyful association with your community. We focus on social connection, which is developing peer relationships and also intergenerational relationships so that these youth realize they can have a future to look forward to. And we also emphasize building emotional skills, coping skills, processing, communicating, and we also create a space for authenticity, for people to show up and be who they are. And one really kind of helpful question about, what does authenticity even mean? We like to say and ask, what is true to what you know about yourself and who you want to be? And we'll create space for that. We'll celebrate that. We'll walk with you as you journey through that. And so focusing on these outcomes, this is all, again, geared towards thriving, towards wellness. And how we do that, Encircle offers a number of things at the bottom there. We have drop-in hours. So our home is open from 3 to 8 p.m., Monday through Friday, and we often have weekend events, depending on the week. You'll have to check out our calendar. And the drop-in hours are spaces where youth can come and do homework, grab a snack, do an art project, play an instrument, just be themselves and hang out. And then towards the evening, around 5:30, we'll start some of our programming. And our programming is an opportunity for family, for allies, for the community to come and join an activity Monday is service night. Tuesday, we have a writing workshop. Wednesday is art night. Thursday is music night. And Friday is just fun Fridays. It's this cool wild card. And beyond our programming, we have friendship circles, and that gets more specific towards age groups and orientations. So you can gather with peers and talk and connect in a safe space. And so we have everything from a youth friendship circle to a queer people of color friendship circle to an asexual and aromantic friendship circle, and some are for adults and some are for youth. And those circles are either online or in person, just wherever you feel comfortable participating. We also, I want to say, we have a parent circle as well. It's called Lunch with Lisa, and it's where parents get to talk with other parents of LGBTQ plus youth or children and share experiences, share questions, share some struggles. And that's in the presence of a licensed family therapist, which is free. All of our programming is free, everybody. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy about that. Even our therapy that we also offer is extremely affordable. So we have therapy for the LGBTQ individuals, but our therapy is also for the parents or the siblings or the partner. And if insurance doesn't cover it, it's on a sliding scale based on your income. So extremely affordable. We don't like to turn anyone away. And the first consultation is free. So please check out encircletherapy.org. We have amazing therapists that you can read about online. And then, of course, last, we have our Encircle library, or what I like to say, our educational kind of wing. We have a lot of research that we've gathered, whether it's by a family therapist or a researcher to talk about what to do when a kid comes out for parents. Research on gender, research on can sexual orientation be changed, all of this in a way that can be shared with family members who are seeking to understand and to learn. And these PDFs are available online or in print form. We have a booth here if you want to grab some on your way out today. And of course, then there are things like this presentation itself that I, as a community outreach coordinator, love to do in different spaces. I've done them with church councils, I've done them in schools, I've done them at nonprofits, and I'm happy to. It's a great way to get some conversation going. So, any questions so far? I've covered a little bit. Just want to check in on that. Okay. So, as we focus on these, I wanted to share that it is working, that we are meeting our objectives over 92% of the time. 80% of our guests have been to Encircle 21 times or more, so that means they keep coming back. We have about 50 guests at every Encircle home per day, and each month we have about 850 guests. So it's not just a feel-good thing. The things that I put on the previous slide, all of these things are not just feel-good. It's backed by research, and it's bringing results, is what I wanted to emphasize here. Now, this next slide, I want to share the kind of why behind. Why is it working? Why is this effective? And there's a myth about the LGBTQ community that we'd like to clear up. There's a myth that this LGBTQ identity is primarily about sex, and that's the crisis, that's the main interest. However, having an LGBTQ identity is about belonging. Recognizing that something about yourself is fundamentally different from family, church, or social expectations creates a crisis of belonging. And so addressing identity is an important way to stabilize aspects of belonging that directly affect mental and physical health. So in other words, if there's a part of my identity that really contradicts what surrounds me, depending on what I hear in my environment, whether that's included in the space or whether it's excluded in the space, I'm going to start feeling unsafe. I'm going to start feeling isolated or depressed, and things that will affect my mental health. So that's why inclusion of these differences is so important. So this is going to emphasize why this is so important, the kind of gravity of it. And if you were here for our keynote, you might have caught some of these statistics about suicide. So one of the main concerns is that in Utah, suicide is the leading cause of death in people ages 15 to 24 in general. If we look more closely at the LGBTQ community, lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth are 3 times more likely to report a lifetime suicide attempt than their heterosexual peers. More than 40% of lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth have seriously considered suicide. And about 29% report having attempted suicide in the past 12 months. And among the transgender community, about 40% of transgender adults report having made a suicide attempt. And 92% of these individuals report having attempted before the age of 25. So again, the ages of 10, 15 to 25, that's a super vulnerable age. And all of this, honestly, is what fired me up into volunteering. I showed up as a volunteer back in 2018 at Encircle because I started reading some of these things. And as a teacher, I'm thinking of my classroom, or I'm thinking of my family and the numbers. That means like almost half of my classroom, or that means, I don't know, I was just imagining them not being there and how that affects the culture, that affects the relationships, that affects the atmosphere of these spaces to have empty spaces at the table. You know what I mean? So it was just not okay with me, which is why I'm here. And that goes into, though, there is another myth about the LGBTQ community that being LGBTQ just means that like you have a mental illness or that you're going to, or it's part of that identity. So there is a myth there that LGBTQ plus youth have a predisposition to having a mental illness, but in actuality, there's a greater prevalence of mental illness, but that does not mean they have a predisposition. LGBTQ plus youth's mental health status is as diverse as the youth themselves. It's an unwelcoming or hostile environment. It's rejecting attitudes towards their identity that increases their risk, that leads to negative health outcomes. And I had a therapist that really wanted me to say these words specifically and emphasize that there's nothing inherently, there's nothing in the sexual or gender minority being LGBTQ, there's nothing in our brain or in our bodies that is predisposed to having mental health. It's reactions that induces hopelessness, fear, or isolation. So LGBTQ plus humans are not broken. Our reaction to them is what is broken and causing these risks. So to reemphasize, it's experiences of isolation, depression, or loneliness. This is going to affect anyone, regardless of your sexuality, regardless of your orientation. These things, of course, will affect your mental health. We just find this is prevalent among those that feel rejected in the LGBTQ community. And we've done some research to show that generally someone identifies that they're LGBTQ+, or that something about them is different by the time they're 12, if not before. However, depending on their environment and if they feel safe, many stay in the closet for 10 years and they don't come out until they're 22. So that means that for 10 years, they're sitting and maybe hearing comments that are rejecting about a part of their identity that they're keeping secret, but they're hearing these comments at the dinner table or in church or at school or in their friend circles. Wherever they might be hearing these things, it might be increasing their crisis of not feeling safe or not feeling like they belong or not feeling like they can come out to you and show who they are and be authentic. So rejection essentially is the big key indicator of whether or not a person is going to have mental or emotional struggles. So there's some other statistics here specifically about rejection. Young LGBTQ plus people who are highly rejected by their families are 8 times more likely to attempt suicide than those whose families engage in few or no rejecting behaviors. LGBTQ plus people who experience high levels of family rejection are also 3 times more likely to use illegal drugs or to contract HIV or sexually transmitted disease. So what this is saying is that the more rejected a youth feels, the more they are going to turn to unsafe behaviors that will affect their mental, physical, and emotional health. So what are rejecting behaviors? What does this even mean? Well, the Family Acceptance Project has done some beautiful research. Please check out their website. They have some PDFs that share this information, and they've outlined what some of these rejecting behaviors are that increase the risk. Things like verbal harassment or name calling because of your LGBTQ child's identity, excluding the LGBTQ plus youth from family or family activities, blocking access to LGBTQ plus friends, events, and resources, maybe blaming that child when they're discriminated against because of their LGBTQ plus identity, pressuring the child to be more or less masculine or feminine, telling the child that they will shame the family by how they look or act, or making your child keep their LGBTQ plus identity a secret and not letting them talk about it. These are sometimes gut reactions or conditioned reactions that we do, but we need to keep in mind the impact that it is making on the child. So on the flip side, here are some behaviors that promote well-being. If you want to be helpful, talking to your child about their LGBTQ plus identity, expressing affection when you learn your child's identity, supporting the child's LGBTQ identity even though you might feel uncomfortable, advocating for the child when they are mistreated because of their LGBTQ identity, requiring that others respect your LGBTQ child and bringing your LGBTQ child to organizations or events, talking with clergy or helping your faith community support your LGBTQ child, connecting your LGBTQ child with an adult role model to show them options for the future, welcoming your child's LGBTQ friends and partners to your home, supporting your child's gender expression, and overall believing that your child can have a happy future as an LGBTQ adult. These things can promote well-being in them. So, questions about any of this before I go on to diversity? Yes. Mm-hmm.
So is Utah's rates higher than national rates for some of those things, for suicide and stuff? Is that?
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. I don't think we are the highest, but we are higher than the national average, yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay. Yes.
Would you say one of the reasons why we're the highest is because we're likely to do those things we shouldn't be doing on the list? You gave that list of the behavior that proposed. So you think the community maybe is doing more of those activities? Do you think that could be a reason why we're the highest? Or
Good question. And for my online friends, I forgot to repeat. So the first question was, is Utah the highest, or is Utah's suicide rates higher than the national average? And yes, they are higher. I haven't checked recently, so I can't say Utah is the highest, but we are higher than the national average. And then the second, we're top 3. Ooh, that was a social worker saying we might be the top 3. And then the second question was, do we think that the reason why Utah is among the highest is because we engage in these behaviors more often? And I mean, I haven't researched this, and I'm not a researcher, so I don't want to say yes or no, but I like that you're asking the question. I think that is the question to ask, and that's the point. Like, if you didn't catch the keynote, which I loved, like, the question is why? Why would Utah maybe, 1, be the place that has this more happening more often, but 2, also be in a position to be an example in these areas of learning and growing and adjusting and helping combat some of these. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. Thank you for asking it. Let's keep wondering. Yes?
So has the religious community welcomed the education that you guys are promoting, and how has that been accepted?
Beautiful question. So the question was, has the religious community welcomed what we are providing, and how has it been accepted? And I would say yes. I mean, what's cool is that, I've seen a number of religious individuals come through our doors. So I would say it happens on either an individual or neighborhood basis. I've had one congregation invite me to their leadership meetings, and I got to meet with the leaders of that whole ward or congregation, which was really cool. And that's the change that I'm seeing more on an individual neighborhood basis, which is wonderful. I always wonder what is keeping those people away that haven't shown up, that aren't walking through the door. And that's something that I continually love to brainstorm with people or strategize on, because I would love to reach those that aren't coming. But for those that come, they come because they have questions, and they come because they're willing to learn. And it's been beautiful. There was once Stephanie talks about a volunteer training where in the room there was someone who was a religious leader who came to understand his congregation more. There was a religious leader who was in the closet, and then there was a parent, and then it was just this beautiful mixture of people who had shown up, bringing their religious beliefs with them, and they didn't have to leave it at the door in order to start learning and to bring this volunteer work forward. So it's been a good response, I would say. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for your questions. I love it. All right. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the diversity that we find within the LGBTQ plus community. So there's a lot of terminology here. I'm so sorry for those of you that might not be able to see. So from top to bottom, it kind of goes through the LGBTQ acronyms and expands on some of these definitions. So a lesbian is someone who is attracted to women. Someone who is gay might identify as someone who's attracted to men. Someone who is bisexual is someone who is attracted to both men and women. Someone who is pansexual is someone who is attracted to someone regardless of their gender. It could be someone who is non-binary. It could be someone who is transgender or intersex. Gender is not the determining factor of their attraction. And I will say, always check in with an individual about how they identify and what they're willing to share about that experience for them. Because there might be some people who say they're bisexual, but they also might be attracted to someone who's transgender, but they get to choose the term they go by. I'm just sharing some of what we've researched, but the individual's experience always trumps what my definitions are. I just want to say that as a disclaimer. And so going on to someone who is transgender is someone who is assigned a certain sex at birth, but that is not their internal gender identity. And someone who is queer, this is an umbrella term for anyone under this colorful, beautiful umbrella. And I know that in different age groups or parts of the world, queer has a negative connotation. And some in the community are reclaiming this word. And generally, as a rule, I don't use the term queer to describe someone unless I've heard them describe themselves as queer first. Does that make sense? So if they can use the word to describe themselves, then that's a signal like, okay, I know this is safe for that person. But I never outright call someone queer until I hear them use that word first. Someone who is questioning is someone who doesn't know. They're on a journey and they're exploring and figuring out where they are in this spectrum. Someone who is intersex is someone who is born with a combination of traditionally labeled male or female characteristics, internally or externally. So they could have a mixture in their anatomy or in their gonads or in their chromosomes, different parts of their body and makeup. And then someone who is asexual is someone who maybe doesn't often experience sexual attraction, if at all, or sexual attraction does not play a main role in their relationships, if at all. So, and that is a spectrum in and of itself as well. So, a little introduction there. Any questions here? I did get a question in the last session that I thought was really good. Someone asked if someone is non-binary, if that means they're asexual. And those are two different things. And this kind of groups them into what it's talking about. So being asexual is about your orientation or sexuality. It's who you're attracted to. Your gender identity, being transgender, intersex, or non-binary, that's a gender identity. That's how you identify yourself. And queer and questioning could be either or. It could be about your gender, it could be about your sexuality, either one of those. Any questions here? Yes?
So, is this important for me to know or important for the person to know about themselves? What's the significance of understanding the definition?
Got it. So the question was, is this important for me to know or is this important for someone to understand themselves? And I would say both. I would say both. And I would say it's only important for you to know to the extent that you hope to connect to someone in this community. This can be a point of connection when someone feels that you understand a little bit of where they're coming from, or it even helps you know the questions to ask. So I have an example. So years ago, I had a friend who was so awesome and wonderful and was honored me by sharing that they were transitioning. I had known them as female, but they were transitioning to being male, and they shared this with me in a park. And I was like, cool. And that was it. Like, I didn't ask anything. And we started talking about books, and we started talking about, and I don't think that was like outright offensive, but I don't think that person felt comfortable sharing more about their experience with me because my lack of questions didn't draw any stories or about, I didn't think to say like, what's your experience been like? Or how does it feel to go by a name that you get to choose, or how it can help the conversation along, I think. So, yeah. It also helps with like, some people in the house joke about how they'll share their orientation, and then a loved one will like recommend they ask someone out, and they're like, that's not my orientation. Like, were you listening? So that's also another cute reason why it's important. So if you're a visual person, that might look like a lot, sorry, but it could be helpful visually. So from top to bottom, we have some spectrums. Left to right. So the first one is just about your biological sex, again, whether you're male or female or something in between, being intersex. The line in the middle, again, is about your gender identity, how you feel inside. Do you feel like a man inside? Do you feel like a woman inside? There's a spectrum in between there, being transgender or gender fluid or non-binary. The acronyms that you see on the bottom, you might see within the transgender community. F to M means that it is someone who is assigned female at birth and they're transitioning to being male. And then on the other end, someone who was assigned male at birth and is transitioning to female, M to F. Could be a transgender individual, but often at the Encircle House, we just drop the acronym and we're just going to call you a woman if that's how you identify, or we'll call you a man if that's how you identify. And on the bottom, again, your sexual orientation, who you like, and the spectrum there. Any questions? I have one more graph for y'all. Can you handle it? Is that okay? This one's my favorite. So this is the attraction and aversion assessment. This is my favorite because it helped me accept the diversity within myself when it comes to attractions. So for whatever reason, I grew up thinking that there was one kind of attraction, and it was always like a degree of sexual attraction, right? But this graph from left to right differentiates different kinds of attraction. And then vertically, above the middle line, there's attraction. Below the line, there's aversion. I do not want that, or at all. And then it has quadrants of opposite sex, same sex. We should include a section that is for someone that is non-binary or intersex. Personally, I've learned a lot by just writing a name. If I'm trying to understand my feelings about so-and-so, I'll just write their name on this graph, and then I get to write, it's kind of like a soundboard. I get to put multiple dots or X's. So I'll first start with aesthetic attraction. How aesthetically attracted am I to this person? And I describe aesthetics with a little metaphor of if you're at a museum and you go with a friend, there are different art pieces that are going to draw you in, but it might not draw your friend in because they're drawn to a different piece of art. Visually, that's pretty similar with attraction as well. So I can ask myself, how aesthetically attracted am I to this person? Is it 100? Is it 50? Am I actually averted? Which would be maybe a little sad. And then there's affectional, which is, how much do I want to express affection to this person? How much do I want to show them that I care for them? Do I want to do it through a letter? Do I want to hold hands? Do I want to snuggle? That's affectional. And maybe I move to do that with someone. And the next kind of attraction is romantic attraction. How much do I want a committed romantic relationship with them? Do I want to be partnered with them? And then the final attraction is erotic or sexual attraction. How much you want to engage in that with this person. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same. So someone who is asexual, their erotic or sexual attraction is going to be on the bottom half of the chart. It may not be all the way down at 0, but it might be neutral or towards the bottom. The spectrum is there. But maybe they have a high romantic attraction to someone and other areas. So each person is going to have a different reaction in their bodies, in their minds, in their hearts. And I think that's whether you're straight or LGBTQ+. So this is just kind of the variety that can appear and show up for us. And maybe that's going to change over time. Maybe I feel a certain way towards someone on the first date, and then maybe by date 5, this soundboard is changing and flowing like waves. It's very cool. Any questions here? Did that make sense? This is maybe the most complicated thing to explain. Okay. Thank you for indulging me. This last image just kind of shows, oh no, we're like out of time. I want to keep going. Yes, I'll end with kind of talking about inclusion and some of the things that we can learn here. Inclusion can start with how we change our language. These are some ideas to avoid because it puts people in a box. She's just going through a lesbian phase. I never would have guessed that you were gay. Very kind of conditional responses, but we don't think about how this phrase actually puts someone in a box and places expectations on how they should express themselves. And so when you're trying to find a behavior of love, listening is huge. And learning how to ask, how can I help? How can I be the mom, dad, teacher that you need? How can I help create a safe space for you? These create connection and belonging. And so with the last 2 slides, this is a quote. We got to talk about Brene Brown. We got to shout out, who's done so much research. Brene Brown shares that people who have a strong sense of love and belonging believe they are worthy of love and belonging. The opposite of belonging is fitting in. Belonging is belonging to yourself first. It doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. You are imperfect, you are wired for struggle, but you are worthy of love and belonging. That is by Brene. So in summary, all of the things that we can learn from the LGBTQ community are that identity is about belonging. Behaviors that are rejecting increase the risk of mental illness. And environments and practices that promote belonging or celebrate their identity or difference, this improves wellness, and we can create this through deepening our relationships by unboxing another's identity and their expression, and by shifting priorities and attention away from expectations to wellness outcomes, like making sure they have a positive emotional experience, that they're building social connections, strengthening their emotional skills, and finding space for authenticity. Any other questions? I'll just stay after if you have questions because I think we're out of time. But I want to thank you so much for being here today. And please reach out to my email. I'd love to connect with you. Thank you.